Have our second speaker, second technical session. We have with us CA Ruthvik Sangvi from Mumbai. I might now request CA Jalapati, a regional council member, to introduce the speaker of the session. Thank you.
Senior members, friends in this profession, very good evening to all of you. He is a chartered accountant with more than 15 years of post-qualification experience. He is involved in the firm's core international tax and foreign exchange regulatory advisory services. His focus areas are inbound and outbound strategy, corporate and H&I investment planning, transfer pricing, income tax, and FEMA representations and compliances. He is also convener of the Taxation Committee of the Indian Merchant Chamber. He presents regularly at various forums, including at the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, Bombay Chartered Accountants Society, and Chamber of Tax Consultants. He has recently co-authored a publication on digital taxation, a holistic view, published by Taxman. He has also co-authored Tax Withholding from Payments to Non-Residents, which has been co-published by CCH and the Chamber of Tax Consultants. With these few words, I am very much happy to introduce the great speaker, CA Ruthvik Sangvi, to the viewers. Thank you so much to the dynamic chairman of SIRC, DC Jain, for this great opportunity given to me.
We now have the e-felicitation of speaker CA Ruthvik Sangvi. Over to you, sir.
Many thanks, Chairman and Vice Chairman of SIRC, for inviting me to talk at the SIRC's regional conference. It is a personal honor for me to be with all of you here, especially with the esteemed faculty that this course is having, and I am personally obliged to all of you for giving me this opportunity. My topic for today's session is, taxation and FEMA aspects for NRIs. And I understand that the time has, due to, obviously, it is not in control of SIRC. However, the time has overshot, and therefore I would like to start with my session immediately so that the next speaker can also start, at least with as little delay as possible. So my topic is NRIs, facilities and obligations under tax and FEMA. And this particular topic holds a bit of relevance, especially for what has happened in the very recent past when we talk about, our amendments which have come through the Finance Act 2020. But before I start going into the technical aspects, I think what we need to first lay a background of is that why is this topic important? We all know, and NRIs, frankly, NRIs are a very important part of India's economy. India is actually the largest receiver of remittances from abroad, which is essentially sent by NRI brothers and sisters who are working abroad to India. In fact, it is quite much more than what FDI we get in India. So you can imagine the importance that we today hold for remittances from NRIs. But that is every year's regular course of events which happen. More important than that is that whenever India has faced a difficulty, it is our NRIs brothers and sisters who come to India's help always. There have been cases in the past when India has sought help and NRIs have invested into India lock, stock and barrel. That also has happened surprisingly during the pandemic situation. In the very first few weeks of the pandemic, there were concerns that probably remittances will dry up. On the other hand, remittances have come in more than expected during this few months. The reason probably being that they want a safe haven, and safe haven is always home. So wherever the NRIs are, they always try to see that their investment comes back to India. At least they have some presence in India, either financial social is always there, but financially also they would like to have a strong presence in India. But what has happened in the recent past has rattled some of the NRIs, and especially when we talk to NRIs, they do feel that why is there been so much change in the law? And that is why my focus today has been to deal with these aspects, and particularly to deal with it in a manner which drives home the points which I want to all of you to take back home. Therefore, what I have done is that I have tried to frame this presentation in form of case studies, and I will focus on those case studies because of the shortage of time, on those which I find are relevant for the changes which have occurred in the very recent past. And please forgive me that I will be skipping some of the slides, which may be those which you may already know about, or those which you can always read up upon when you're reading this presentation later on. Also, one more point is that I have shared this presentation earlier as part of the paper book of the SIRC's conference. I request the organizers that to allow me to send this presentation separately to be hosted on their portal, so that the changes which I have made past my sharing of that presentation can always be looked upon, because there have been some changes which I have made in the past few days. Now, we first go into the residential status. And while I can see that I have pointed out, several definitions and whatnot, as far as non-residents are concerned, the main focus of a non-resident, when you look at it, is very different when it comes to tax and FEMA. Under income tax, you are only concerned with how much of the income of an NRI gets taxed in India. Well, under FEMA, not just for non-residents, but even for residents, it is the cross-border transactions that are happening is what they are seeking to cover. Now, as I discussed just now, that NRIs are considered to be, after all, equivalent to Indian citizens, and the present government in its last, when it was Mr. Modi had gone outside India and interacted with NRIs, soon after that, they had made several changes as far as Foreign Exchange Management Act is concerned. And now investment from NRIs is considered at par with citizens of India. That is a big change. That is what has happened under FEMA. But under income tax, the reverse has happened in some cases where they have tried to see to it that people do not try to take benefit of the taxation provisions which are relevant for NRIs. There are some beneficial provisions and people have tried to take. And obviously the scope for NRIs is also quite restricted, right? So the scope for NRIs always remains taxable only their Indian incomes. Now, this both, though different laws, though different objectives, are probably put at par, and when their definitions come, when their scope comes, the definitions are worded and they have tried to bring them in parity. In doing so, there has been confusion. Even today, after so many years that FEMA has come into play, we get questions from NRIs saying that, oh, I am following the income tax definition to consider whether I am a FEMA resident or not. And it should be very, very clear that both the definitions are very different. The intentions to cover what persons as NRIs is quite different from both these laws. So before I go into these definitions and technical terms, I would like to give this conceptual background that please bear in mind that both the laws are very different. And what I've tried to here do is that in doing through various case studies, where is this mixture and where is this mishmash happening? And therefore, what should one person take care of? So without further ado, let me bring out that resident and non-resident definitions are both possible. And under, I'll just try to find if I can have a pointer system. Yeah. So resident and non-resident definitions are there common for income tax and FEMA. The terms are common. The definitions are different, as I'll explain later on. A deemed resident is a new category which has now come in since Finance Act 2020. Not ordinarily resident is very relevant under income tax because it gives a big relief to NRIs who are caught into the definition of residents. For the first few years, they are exempted from their foreign incomes. This definition now gains a lot of importance. The reason being that more and more people, more and more NRIs may turn into not ordinarily residents. So resident but not ordinarily residents in the next few years, and we will see that upheaval happening in the next couple of years. NRI and NR are terms which are used for income tax and FEMA. Non-resident Indian is essentially a citizen of India who is a non-resident, but non-resident would cover all other foreign citizens. This is where a term OCI comes in, overseas citizen of India, which is again different from citizenship. It is only a special type of visa which is given to NRIs, a special type of relief through the Citizenship Act is given. However, it does not mean that a person is a citizen of India. He is an overseas citizen of India in the sense that when he comes to India, then he will be given several benefits as compared to what other foreign citizens may not get. So that to that extent, the OCA definition is very important, but the distinction should always be kept in mind. The person of Indian origin is again a definition which is used both in income tax and FEMA. While income tax has retained it, the practical ground reality is that there are no fresh PIO cards issued because the definition has now been subsumed into the OCI definition, the Overseas Citizen of India definition. So it is advisable for all foreign citizens who are eligible to obtain the OCI card. They must obtain the OCI card. There is no specific relief now left for PIOs. The only ones which are left are the ones which should continue so that they do not get into trouble. But otherwise, new reliefs are all being offered to OCI card holders. And it should be borne in mind that all OCI card holders can be persons of Indian origins. However, a person of Indian origin, all persons of Indian origin may not automatically be OCIs because the conditions to fulfill both these terms are different. It should be borne in mind. And it should also be borne in mind that a person falling within the definition of OCI itself will not get all the benefits. He must go ahead and obtain the OCI card because the benefits are being offered to an OCI card holder, not just anybody who falls within the definition of OCI. So if a foreign citizen client of yours tells you that I'm very well covered within the OCI definition, please request him to apply for one and get the OCI card holder so all the benefits start accruing to him. Similarly, we have a term called returning Indian, and this is one case study which I will take you through. Again, relevant for FEMA for people who are coming back to India, who were earlier non-residents, but they have come to India. There were several reliefs given to them since 1992, for especially when the economy tried to open up. Many NRIs wanted to come back, but they say that we have hesitation because our foreign assets and incomes are being probably under question. And therefore, a lot of reliefs were provided, which now have been subsumed under the FEMA Act 2000 in Section 6, subsection 4. I'll take you through more details on the later slides. A not permanently resident is a specific definition again under FEMA for exemption from FEMA for Indian residents who are leaving India or who are coming to India only for a specific term of period. Citizenship earlier was not too much relevant, especially because FERA, which was revolving around citizenship, had done away with the citizenship criteria as far as definition of residence is concerned. However, now there are some issues because more and more citizens are blocked from accessing India's FDI network as well as investments into immobile property depending on their citizenship. Income tax earlier wasn't relevant. However, today now it has become relevant because of the Finance Act 2020, bringing in definitions which are revolving around whether a person is an Indian citizen or not. Finally, you have the term domicile. A domicile is different from citizenship, and it is mainly a criteria to determine liability to tax in certain countries. Why I have put this term here is that one person should be, when advising their clients, they should be aware, because in several countries, and especially in the Western countries, there are countries which have estate duties. And where those estate duties are applicable, domicile becomes very important. Your NRI client may probably be able to get a domicile of India, and therefore his estate duty may actually change. And that is why the term is quite important for all of us to know about. But in going into all these terms, let me first start with the income tax definition of resident and ordinarily resident of India. We all know the erstwhile conditions. The erstwhile conditions being that if resident in India, if a person is in India for more than 181 days during the previous year, or if he is in India for more than 60 days during the previous year, and 365 days during the preceding 4 previous years. So we have Section 61A and Section 61C. These are the main 2 conditions for a person to turn a resident. Now the relief has been provided from 60 days to 181 days for 2 categories of persons. One, a resident who is leaving India for the purposes of employment outside India. And the another is a resident Indian citizen who has left India as a member of a crew of an Indian ship. This has certain issues for expats and sailors who continue for more than 181 days in the year of departure. I will try to take up that issue when I am coming in the later slides. What our number of days test is actually one of the most simple tests for residents as compared to some other countries. You go to UK, you have several factors to be considered whether you are a resident or not. You go to USA, then probably if you're a citizen, then you're considered as a resident. But if you're a non-citizen, then there are again several other factors you have to look into whether you fall within the definition of residence or not. For example, in a US citizen who gives up his citizenship still remains a resident for a period of years. So now all these kind of tests are quite complex. As compared to that, the Indian test of number of days is quite easy. But that was all true till Finance Act 2020. The reason being that it was probably noted by the department when we all, asked our clients to fill in the number of days of their stay in India, which has been asked for a past few years by the income tax form. That data and what, Amit Bhai just now, mentioned about big data, they are actually using that data. They're using the data to churn out that, okay, how many people are actually trying to game the system by staying as close to 181 days as possible. And we have all heard of people who come to us and tell us, oh yes, and they probably are proud to say that, we have stayed for 180 days and we are enjoying the NRI status. We have stayed for 179 days. We stay for 172 days. So these kind of things are happening. These kind of things were acknowledged and noticed by the CBDT, and therefore a change has been now made. What is now the new condition which is applicable from the financial year 2021? It is that the 182 days relaxation which was provided for a person who came on a visit to India, that has now been reduced to 120 days for Indian citizens and persons of Indian origin who have total income from sources other than foreign sources of more than 15 lakhs. So what they've done is that if somebody was crossing that 15 lakh barrier as far as income largely covered from their Indian sources is concerned, if he is crossing that 15 lakh limit, then his status can become resident if he is on a visit to India, and when he was earlier enjoying 182-day relief, that relief will now come down to 120 days. The problem that happened was that the initial amendments which came in by the finance bill, there was a hue and cry straight away from that day itself, and the next day itself a press release was issued, and finally what they were stated was that their incomes which were sought to be taxed, which otherwise would have been their global incomes of persons who say crossed the 120-day barrier, those people were then told that no, we are not concerned with your global income, we are only concerned with your income which was sourced from businesses or professions in India, which meant that their relief which was curtailed, but at the same time they are also made to be deemed as not ordinarily residents under section 6.6. which means that such type of people will become perpetually NORs. As long as you fall within this clause, you will be covered under NOR definition as per section 6.6c, and you will remain perpetually and not ordinarily resident, which means that your income from foreign sources will not be liable to tax in India. So then what happened at the end of the day? You had a huge change which came into the definition of residents after a very long time. The definition brought out a lot of hue and cry, a lot of confusion. The language itself was not desirable. At the end of the day, they came back saying that no, fine, even if such persons are considered to be residents, they will be deemed to be a resident but not ordinarily resident, leading to probably only a little bit of increase in scope of income, as I'll show you later on. There is a threshold limit which has been now brought in, and for this new criteria, there is one more of deemed resident which also follows the same threshold, so that will be useful there. This threshold limit is useful even there. The new criteria for residential status are applicable only if the total income from other than income from foreign sources exceeds 15 lakh rupees during the previous year. They have defined the term income from foreign sources, which means income which accrues or arises outside India and is not deemed to accrue or arise in India. Again, a change which has now recently been brought in, except for income derived from a business controlled in or a profession set up in India. Now, this term is there in section 5. When it considers a scope of income for a not ordinarily resident. However, that term has hardly ever been used to my knowledge. We have not seen too much of an applicability of it in practice also. However, that has become the keystone. That has become the changer as far as this whole provisions are concerned. What does that term mean is what I'll take you through during my first case study. There is an issue of circular reference because when I look at the total income, when I'm talking about total income, the total income definition is as per section 245, which takes me back to section 5, which again brings me to the scope of total income, which again is determinable by the residential status. So my residential status is determined by my total income, which is determined by my residential status. So I'm going around in circles. This probably was brought to light. However, no change has been made because probably the feeling is that when you're testing this threshold limit, you do not consider whether a person is a resident or a non-resident. You only consider him as a resident. By law, if somebody fights over it, then maybe there may be issues, but that is what the way it is today worded. There is again a new subsection which was brought in, section 6(1)(a), deemed resident. What does it mean? It says that whatever is covered in clause 1 doesn't matter. An individual who is a citizen of India, who has his total income again exceeding 15 lakh of rupees from Indian sourced income, shall be deemed to be a resident in India if he is not liable to tax in any other country or territory by reason of his domicile or residence or any other criteria of similar nature. What was the idea here? The idea here was that you need to bring in a status which brings to tax people who are otherwise enjoying a nomad status. A nomad meaning a person who is a non-resident of all countries around the world, who enjoys staying probably just less than 182 days in India and otherwise travels all over the world and then probably pays tax only in the incomes where they are sourced, but doesn't get globally taxed on any income, neither in India nor anywhere else. Now, to capture these people, they brought in these provisions. Again, as I told, there was a huge hue and cry, especially from people who are staying in the UAE, United Arab Emirates, where there is no income tax at all. So when you talk about a person who is not liable to tax, what does that mean? The whole of UAE, nobody is taxed on their incomes. So which means that are they all automatically deemed residents of India? And in the finance bill, please bear in mind, the provision read as if that they were deemed resident and ordinarily resident, meaning their global incomes would have become taxable. Immediately a clarification was brought in saying that no, they will not be taxed on their global incomes, only on incomes from their business or profession set up in India. Which again meant that these same people were again paired with the introduction of a new category of not ordinarily resident status, which results in that all deemed residents will perpetually be not ordinarily residents as per section 6(6)(d). Now, what another issue had come up at that stage was on the language part of it, that whether a person would automatically become deemed resident without satisfying any of the clauses under section 6(1). That is now being clarified through the latest Taxation and Other Laws, Relaxation and Amendment of Certain Provisions Act 2020 very recently. I know that I'm probably talking in too many terminologies. So what I tried to do is that I've brought these provisions, not only the ones which are erstwhile, but the new ones also, into a form of a flow chart. So I hope that, it may look a bit complex, but I think that if at any point of time you are under question that whether a person is falling within which criteria and which status, then this flowchart might be helpful. So first we have to start with that, is a person in India for more than 182 days or more? If so, if he is, then what happens is that he is essentially a resident. But we still need to determine whether he is a resident and ordinarily resident or resident but not ordinarily resident. For that purpose, we need to have the two tests which are there for not ordinarily resident under clauses A and B of section 6(6), which is a non-resident for 9 out of 10 preceding previous years or has been in India for less than 729 days in the 7 preceding previous years. Now, if that person does not satisfy these two tests, then he remains as a resident and ordinarily resident, which means his global incomes will be taxable. However, if he satisfies either of those tests, meaning he is either a non-resident for 9 out of the 10 preceding previous years, or he has been in India for less than 729 days during the 7 preceding previous years on a cumulative basis. If he fulfills any one of these tests, then he will be a resident but not ordinarily resident, which means his foreign incomes will largely not be taxable except for those incomes which are from a business controlled in India or a profession set up in India. Now we come back to whether a person is in India for 182 days or more, and what if that person is not in India for more than 182 days or not. So then we look at the test whether the person is in India for 60 days or not, whether he is in India for 60 days at least or not. Let us take an example that a person is not in India for even 60 days. He is in India for less than 60 days. This is one of the most simple tests which was earlier there. If a person is in India for less than 60 days, the erstwhile conditions resulted in a person becoming a non-resident of India, which meant that only his Indian sourced income would be taxed in India. His global incomes would be out of scope as far as the Indian Income Tax Act is concerned. However, as I told you on just the earlier slide, that the new deemed resident test has been brought in, which means that even before you go to the non-resident test, you have to first check whether a person has become a deemed resident or not. What are the conditions for a deemed resident? There are two conditions. First is his total income from sources other than foreign sources more than 15 lakhs, and is he an Indian citizen and not liable to tax in any other country due to his residence, domicile, or such other criteria? If he satisfies both these tests, if he does not satisfy any of these tests, any one of these tests, then he remains a non-resident. However, if he satisfies both these tests cumulatively, he will be considered to be a deemed resident who, as I explained to you, will be covered under the definitions of not ordinarily resident also. So he will be automatically become a not ordinarily resident. He will never become a resident but ordinarily resident. He will always be deemed to be a not ordinarily resident. Now let us look at a place where he is in India. That person is in India for more than 60 days, for 60 days or more. Then we have to check whether his stay in India for the past 4 preceding years is more than 365 days or not. Say he is not, which means that the other test has also failed. Again, he will be a non-resident if, as we go as per the erstwhile conditions. As per the new conditions, you need to test the deemed residential status. But now let us go back. So deemed residential status you will satisfy, and then you will decide whether he is a non-resident or a NOR. However, if that person is in India during the past 4 years for 365 days or more, which means that he is in India in the current year for 60 days or more, and he is in the past 4 years has been there for more than 365 days. Largely speaking, as per the erstwhile conditions, that meant that the person was either a resident, an ordinary resident, or an NOR. However, now there are certain reliefs which are there, since earlier also. What are those reliefs? The first relief is that instead of 60 days, you consider the test as 182 days. That is, if a person is an Indian citizen who left India in the previous year for employment outside India or as member of crew of an Indian ship. If that condition is satisfied, then that person actually replaces the 60-day test by the 182-day test. And as we discussed, that he has been in India for less than 182 days here only. Therefore, he becomes a deemed resident, whether or not he becomes a deemed resident. If not, then he'll be a non-resident, or otherwise he'll be a not ordinarily resident. This is one of the reliefs. You also have a relief B, which says that if, say, for example, you don't satisfy this relief test, then is he an Indian citizen or a person of Indian origin who, being outside India, has come on a visit to India. So one is for outbound citizens, and one is for inbound. So persons who are going out of India, whether they are leaving for these purposes, then yes, they will be considered to have got the relief. Or if the person is not such a person, but he is a person who is coming to India on a visit to India, again, then this relief would be available to him. If he is available, then you again have to check whether he is a deemed resident or not before determining whether he is an NOR or a non-resident. However, let us say that this person is not even fulfilling this relief condition. Then what you have to now check is that he has fulfilled the 60 plus 365 days test. He has been in India for more than 365 days. He has been in the past 4 years also for 365 days or more. He has been in India in the current previous year for 60 days. Therefore, his test is met. He remains a resident. So you go back to the resident test here, which I have already highlighted to you earlier, and you check out whether he still fulfills the NOR test or not. If he fulfills the NOR test, he may still remain a not ordinarily resident. Otherwise, he will become a resident and ordinarily resident. Now, say for example that this relief is available, but that relief has now been restricted, as I earlier mentioned to you. What is that relief now? That whether his total income from sources other than foreign sources is more than 15 lakhs or not. If his sources, if that be so, if not, then that person will still enjoy the reliefs, and therefore he will go by the deemed residential status test and then determine whether NOR or NR. However, if it is, then you need to check whether he is in India for more than 120 days or not. If, for the example, that person is in India for more than 120 days, meaning for more than is in India for 120 days or more, then if not, then he is a non-resident, clearly, because if he is not for 120 days or more, he is clearly a non-resident. However, if yes, then he will again be deemed to be a not ordinarily resident. Please bear in mind, the test do not make you automatically a resident. They in fact have covered these clauses in section 6.6 for not ordinarily resident, which means that person will become a not ordinarily resident. I hope that this complex flowchart, while you apply it to individual cases, should be helpful to all of you. Because this 120 plus 365 days test is the new test. If it is met, then that person will remain a not ordinarily resident. Now, the 6 residential status brings out a clause of not liable to tax. And that has been now a term which has been brought into the Act. The term was earlier actually used for determining residence under the double tax avoidance agreements, the tax treaties. It was not used under the Act. But now it has been brought in. and it has to be, what it means has not been defined. However, it should be mentioned that it is distinguished from subject to tax. Subject to tax means a person who is actually paying the tax. However, that being not so, it is a liable to tax term. How it will be applied, how it will be interpreted, we will only come to know in the near future. Ideally, the countries where individuals are not taxed would get covered under the not liable to tax part of it. But what about the potential liability to tax? And there have been decisions on this, several decisions which have come to and fro. I have tried to list them in this particular slide. It has been a topsy-turvy turn. It is from M.A. Rafiq in a case where the UAE DTA was given benefit. A person from UAE was given a benefit of UAE DTA, even if the UAE does not tax that person. To a Cyril Pereira case where the benefit was not given. To Azadi Bachao Andolan, which in the case of a Mauritian company said that liable to tax means more than subject to tax, and therefore it may not be that a person has to pay or be liable to tax within that country. However, that again may not be finding relation in when you go to Emirates Fertilizer, where it said that UAE applies. This was all decisions, and then said that no, UAE cannot apply to individuals who are UAE cannot apply to individuals of UAE because they are not taxed in UAE. Green Emirates again flip-flop. Then you have the India UAE DTA itself in the protocol in 2007, bringing out that for the purposes of the treaty, a resident will be considered to be a resident of UAE if he spends not less than 183 days in a calendar year. Please bear in mind, the government is trying to give benefit to the Indian citizens who are living in UAE. If they cross at least 183 days, then they're saying you will get the UAE DTA benefit. However, the Income Tax Act has not tried to curtail those benefits. So you are at loggerheads. This same situation was there for Mauritius for a very long time. India knew that Mauritius is not taxing its companies and still continued its treaty for a very, very long time. And this same issue is now there in for UAE citizens also, UAE residents also since a very long time. You again have the Meera Bhatia case. And so this flip-flop turn is happening. Where it will take you, what will liable to tax mean is something which is probably take me another session to take upon. And therefore, I'm not going in too much depth. But please bear in mind that UAE residents may face this as an issue if their income, total income from Indian sources crosses 15 lakhs. Now, what is the NOR status? We are saying that finally, at the end of the day, everything said and done, it is that NOR status only which will be relevant to them because the new residents, the new statuses are finally giving back to the NOR status. So the NOR status is a unique status which was brought in by the British Raj. It was brought in by since the 1922 Act, somewhere around 1939 it was brought in. The erstwhile categories I have already explained. The new categories which are there are for those who are the new statuses, those who are crossing that 120-day test or those who are deemed resident under Section 61A, those will automatically become NORs. What is the benefit? The benefit, as I mentioned earlier, is only incomes received or accrued in India is taxable for NORs. Incomes earned, accrued or received outside India are not at all taxable in the hands of a resident but not ordinarily resident. Scope of income is very, very similar to the non-resident scope of income. You are only bothered about your Indian incomes. However, the change only is brought in by the income derived from a business controlled in or a profession set up in India. So let us take an example. A resident would be taxable for his total income. His global income, he would be taxable. However, when it comes to a non-resident, income which accrues or arises outside India will not be taxable for him. So only his income which is sourced within India is taxable. Income which is accruing or arising outside India is not taxable. Now what that is for non-resident. What is for NOR? For NOR, there is a carve-out out of the carve-out. There is a carve-out within a carve-out where an income derived from a business controlled in or a profession set up in India is again brought to tax within India. Now, this part is the part which now non-residents who will fall within the status of NOR due to the new definitions need to be careful about. So, the scope of income, only to this extent, income which accrues or arises outside India but is derived from a business controlled in India or a profession set up in India. That is a limited increase in scope of income which has happened. It is an intentional and targeted approach of government. Earlier, probably the intention was to tax the global income. Obviously, it has backfired. That was probably not the intention. Now they have targeted it and kept it narrowed down to the status of NORs. So what are the changes which will happen? You will have cases of many NRIs who will probably face this issue and they may become not ordinarily residents. In this particular table, I have tried to bring out what are the adverse points, what are the beneficial points, and what are the neutral points. The adverse points are that the limited increase in scope of income, as I already told you. there are some concessional tax rates and certain other exemptions which are applicable only to a non-resident, but not to a not ordinarily resident. So please bear that in mind. I'm not going through all of them. However, I just want to bring out that there are certain causes like overall reduction in the years of NOR relief. Say, for example, when a person comes back to India, he generally enjoys between 2 to 3 years of an NOR status, which means that he can decide whether to settle in India or not, or he would not have a big shock of, dealing with the Indian while he's still wrapping up his assets and incomes outside India. All that goes away if that person has already become NOR earlier. Because once you come back to India and you turn resident, you will have to check the 9 out of 10 previous years, and you may not be able to claim that relief just because you've been in NOR earlier. Now you are clearly within the tax compliance framework. It is not that non-residents are strictly not, but you cannot deny that you are not a resident but not ordinarily resident. Therefore, all that compliances will have to be dealt with. Salary for seafarers is not exempt. One important clarification was brought out in 2017 where non-residents were exempted from salaries which are received even in their NRE accounts in India. However, that is relief is only for non-residents, not for not ordinarily residents. And then there is a reporting of directorships which are now held in India. They have to report that. There was a provision brought in and probably they wanted even foreign directorships to be reported. After representation, they removed that for non-residents. However, for resident but not ordinarily residents, that still remains. What are the beneficial points? Earlier, for a non-resident, the slab rate benefit was not available. But for a not ordinarily resident, for senior citizens, that benefit will be available. TDS deduction is not as per section 195. Therefore, you will be having to pay, your TDS will be deducted at much lower rates. In some cases, they may not even be deducted at all. Eligible to claim the foreign tax credit for the doubly taxed incomes because he is a resident of India. And then he can avail concessional tax rates under the double tax avoidance agreement where India is the source country. There is a relaxation on reporting requirements. May not be required to file the detailed ITR 2, which otherwise a non-resident would be required to. And access to India DTAA network in respect of foreign sourced incomes is available. What are the neutral points? What doesn't change, but one must bear in mind? There is no obligation to report of foreign assets. That's one big change which non-residents do not like to report their foreign assets. Please bear in mind, even if they become resident but not ordinarily resident, their foreign assets still do not have to be disclosed. However, at the same time, not ordinary residents will be treated as a non-resident for determining their associated enterprise relationship for transfer pricing purposes and also for the purposes of section 93. Otherwise, there are no major changes under the FEMA residential status due to change in tax residential status. Hardly any change. There is only one particular change which happens, which I will deal with when it comes to interest from FCNR or NRE incomes, NRE bank accounts. So what we are coming to is that the business control in India is what essentially business control in income from business control in India or a profession set up in India is what you deal with. There are those issues related to it because business control in India or a profession set up in India has again not been discussed or not been detailed or explained. So I'll just take you to a particular case study which deals with it. But before I do that, you should bear in mind that there will now be several cases for your clients where they will fall as residents of India. But before you say that they are a resident of India, you can always try to check whether they are also a resident under the treaty which India might have with that particular country. Let's take an example, India and UAE. A person who has spent more than 183 days in a calendar year in UAE will be considered as a resident of UAE as per the treaty. Again, in India, he may have crossed, say, for example, 120 days. Or he is having income more than 15 lakhs and he is considered as a deemed resident. You may still go under the treaty and say that, no, I'm a dual resident and therefore I will check whether my residence as per treaty falls in which country. For that, you have to go through a tiebreaker test. You will have to first go through where your permanent home is available. Then if it is there or in both places, if no permanent home or in both places, then you have to go to the center of vital interest. Then you go into your habitual abode. Then finally go into where is your nationality, which probably will be generally in India. And then if he is a national of both countries, which is not possible for India, as I explained to you, overseas citizen of India is not citizenship. It is only a special visa for NRIs. Essentially, what you will go through is the first 4 tiebreaker tests to determine whether a person is a resident or not as per the treaty. I'm sorry for rushing through this because right now I have detailed it in my presentation. So please have a look at each of these terms. What does it mean and where does it take you to? So let us go into a case where Mr. Mehul is an Indian citizen and is residing in UAE since 2006. Since he left India, he has been a non-resident of India up to financial year 1920. However, while his stay in India was 0 days during FY 2021, his stay in UAE is 190 days. Balance days are spent in different countries due to his business-related travel. He has a permanent home available to him in UAE. He also has set up an LLC with his brother in UAE, Choksi and Brothers, which is a firm trading in diamonds. Now, the firm is controlled by their father, who stays in India throughout the year. The brothers manage the sales business, but report to their father, who finally takes the decisions. What are his incomes? His incomes are interest on NRO account of 1 lakh, dividend from Indian companies of 2 lakhs, profits from the firm of 10 lakhs, and sales commission of around 20 lakhs. Capital gains on sale of Indian securities, another 2 lakh rupees. What are the issues? The issues are that can the business be said to be controlled in India? If so, is part control to be considered? Is full control to be considered? If so, then if we have a business controlled in India, then what kind of profits would be taxable in India now because of Mehul Choksi becoming a deemed resident in India? As you notice that he has spent 0 days, but because he is in UAE, for this example and case study, we are saying that he is not liable to tax in UAE and therefore is falling within the deemed residential status. Once that is done, he is a deemed resident, then we come to first can the business be said to be controlled in India? Control has again not been defined under the Act. A reference can be made to decisions on expressions of control and management which are used for determining the residential status of other persons. However, for individuals till date that was not there. For businesses controlled in India, again, can you take that or not? We do not know, except that only the control aspects need to be analyzed, not the management. So we are in gray area around here. Now the business should be controlled in India. When you look at the literal reading of the provision, it means that if only a partial control is in India, the income of that business should not be covered. Ideally, to me, it seems that a business should ideally substantially or fully be controlled from India. However, there is some implicit understanding which has been given by the Bombay High Court decision of Bibi Irani, a very old decision, which is that even a partial control in India would be sufficient to tax the income of the business in India. If so, then what would be the amount of such profits which would be taxable in India? Once the business is controlled partially, then only the profits attributable to the control should be taxable in India. This is what the Supreme Court has stated, not held. There is an obiter dicta, but Bibi Irani, the same Bombay High Court decision, when it went to Supreme Court, it said that as the control of the business is the condition for its application, it is argued that only so much of the income accrues or arises to him without the taxable territories, meaning outside India, attributable to the period of such control is liable to tax. So if, for example, that person who is being made liable to tax on his incomes from his business, which is controlled in India, only to the portion of his control in India that amounts to be the case, that portion of his income should be taxed in India. That seems to be some obiter dicta in the Supreme Court decision. This is the only research, finding which I'm trying to find, which I'm finding from this particular reading of Section 5, which covers this kind of scope since ages. So now, can the profits earned by the firm be taxable in India? We can understand that a person, Mehul Choksi himself, being taxed, but can the profits of the firm be taxable in India? Strictly no. According to my view, even if Mr. Mehul is a resident but not ordinary resident, the taxability is on his own incomes, not on the incomes of his firm. Section 5(1) provides for the scope of income taxable in the hands of the individual concerned. However, liability can arise due to other provisions, namely 632 or permanent establishment in the treaty, because if a person is being considered as a resident of India, he can be brought to tax by saying that no, your place of effective management of that business is also in India. It may be a foreign business, but its business may be said to be controlled from India if that Mehul Choksi is resident of India. Will that happen? Only time will answer that. What about the profits which are earned by Mr. Mehul? Will that be taxable? The business is controlled in India by his father. That is clear. The LLC is abroad. The LLC is in UAE doing its business in UAE. However, the business is controlled in India, but it is not by Mr. Mehul. It is a business which is controlled by his father, not by Mr. Mehul. Section 5(1) provides scope of income taxable in the hands of an individual. Should control also be administered by the same person? Or it can be that no, as long as there is a control in India, then whosoever is falling within the NOR scope of income, he would be taxable. Kanga and Palkhiwala in its commentary seems to suggest that the question of control of business arises only with reference to individuals, as a proviso applies only to them, and it seems to suggest that the control of such NOR person should be there by himself and not by anybody else. If that be the case, that could be a major relief. However, we are not clear on these aspects because there has not been too many precedents on this aspect. Can the sales commission which is earned by Mr. Mehul in UAE be taxable in India? Now, this is an income which is earned by Mr. Mehul directly. Now, if we say that these only incomes derived from business controlled in India are taxable in India, then can we say that only the direct incomes should be considered and not the indirect incomes? Probably the indirect incomes, which are essentially services provided by Mehul Choksi, so his profits from the firm could probably be taxable. But his sales commission is essentially something which is given as a service to the business and the business has paid him. Whether that will be covered, probably there's again a gray area. I'm sorry that there are no answers, but there is not much which has happened on this particular clause till date. Meaning of the phrase derived from, and that is where we may have to study the other precedents on derived word, which again comes to the meaning that it has to be a direct or immediate nexus, which means that probably a sales commission which is not a direct income from the business which Mehul Choksi controls or runs outside India, probably then you may not be, those incomes should not fall within the scope of taxability in India. I'm sorry to speed up now. The treaty implications I have already discussed, whether he is a resident or not, has to be looked at. Meaning of NRI under FEMA. Now let us look at the tax aspects of major changes which have happened under tax we have looked at. When it comes to FEMA, from February 2016, there has been again a change in the NRI definition. And it would be better brought out because there are different meanings now of NRI in different notifications. That is the hallmark of FEMA. FEMA has no one structure. It is littered. The definitions are given everywhere, and you have to scout and look around that which definition will apply to your particular income or transaction. So there are two broad groups. Obviously, the Indian citizens are always considered as NRIs. It is the question about foreign citizens. How will they be considered as NRIs or OCIs? I put it in a loose term as NRI, but whether they will be falling within the OCI term or not. So we have put them into certain groups. This is a broad group which I have brought out, where a person will be eligible to do so or not. We then look at business and portfolio investment, whether you look at bank accounts or whether you look at immobile property. Please bear in mind that all of these will have differing terms as far as an OCI cardholder is concerned. As I told you already, the PIO is there only for certain points. Otherwise, they are all converted into an OCI cardholder. Again, I'm not going through in detail in this. Not permanently resident, I have briefly explained. This is a very specific clause for certain individuals who are in a transitionary period. So now let us come to a case where how does one turn non-resident? Say Mr. Resident wants to shift out of India from financial year 2021. So in which manner will he become a non-resident and what are the safeguards he must employ? This is a case which comes to us time and again when a person says that I want to become a non-resident because I will be going ahead for employment outside India. Now what should be the safeguards I must maintain? So for becoming a non-resident for tax purposes, it is very clear either his stay in India must be less than 60 days, as I already explained to you earlier. Alternatively, he needs to leave India for the purposes of taking up an employment outside India. As I already mentioned, on leaving India, his status will become a non-resident even if he stays in India for less than 182 days. However, again, it should be borne in mind, it is only for Indian citizens. And there's a tricky issue for people who actually have gone ahead for employment after crossing that 182-day barrier, generally around 30th of September. If they left after 30th September, what happens to them? There is no such provision in law. They do remain resident in the year in which they leave, which means that if a person who has left on 5th of October and earned substantial income outside India, he will still be considered as a resident as far as the Income Tax Act is concerned. His global income will remain taxable even for the months in which he has served employment outside India. Probably only the treaty might save him. Otherwise, there is a problem. So if somebody is leaving India, you should be kept in mind that the transitionary period, the number of days test, while very good and simple, it does not help a person if he crosses that barrier and he remains resident in the year in which he leaves. As I already mentioned, a relief will be restricted to 120 days when a person is coming on a visit to India if his income exceeds the 15 lakh barrier. Now, for becoming a non-resident for FEMA purposes, one person has to, the FEMA definition is clear. The person has to leave India for employment or business or vocation or for an uncertain period. These three tests which are met, either for employment abroad or for the purpose of business or vocation or for an uncertain period, makes that such a person a non-resident under FEMA from the day that he leaves. A previous year concept of 181 days test, please bear in mind, is not relevant as far as FEMA is concerned. FEMA is more about intent. Are you intending to stay in India for an uncertain period? Then you will be a resident from the day you come to India. Are you leaving India for an uncertain period? then you will be again a non-resident from the day that you leave India. Are you leaving India for the purpose of employment? It is very clear, then you will be a non-resident from the day that you leave India. You do not need to even wait, and even if you have crossed 182 days in that particular year, again, no issues, you will be considered as a non-resident under FEMA. However, you need to intimate your banks and the financial institutions by writing a letter to them, stating to them that I have turned non-resident. Please convert my accounts into either an NRO account so that there is a clear status which has been put on record as far as the non-residential status is concerned. Again, all this cannot be done as a part of planning. As we already discussed, this 120-day test has also come in because a lot of people did planning around it. It has to be in substance. It has to be for the purpose of actually moving out of India, either on employment or business or for permanent settlement abroad. It cannot be for the purpose of that you go ahead and earn some income for 1 year and come back. Those cases, bear in mind, the tax officers deny the change in residential status clearly and flatly, and it is deservedly so because it is not here for making a quick tax saving that this whole status is concerned. There are people who have attempted it by going abroad for a year, earning an income outside India and then trying to say that I was a non-resident for that year. Those cases, unless genuine, have failed to pass muster as far as tax officers are concerned. What does employment involve? When a person says he is going ahead for employment, it should be a proper employment with appointment letter. There should be an appropriate work visa or employment visa. There has to be a monthly salary. People do this kind of planning where they come to us and tell us, no, I am a non-resident because I earned I went ahead for employment. When you ask for salary, they say, oh yes, there is one salary paid during the whole year at one transaction. How can you have that? You're not going ahead for employment. That is clearly a hoodwinking the system, which will never be allowed. So these are some things which one must check when they check whether a person is a non-resident or not, whether he has turned non-resident or not. Once he has been employed abroad and he is a non-resident, he can open a bank account. He is outside the FEMA network, as we say, and he can open the bank accounts in India, in the foreign countries. As an NRI, is allowed to remit $1 million every year from India. Again, immediate remittance should be possible only for genuine reasons. It should not be again for planning. FEMA goes by a philosophy of what you cannot do directly, you cannot do indirectly. Please do not try to beat around that saying that I am interpreting words and phrases. FEMA is more a policy law than a strictly legalistic law as Income Tax Act. Income Tax Act, people have fought for even a comma. However, under FEMA, if you do not go with the intention, RBI will not let you allow you what you intend to do. So please bear in mind, there is a big difference between FEMA and income tax. Income tax, you can have an appeal mechanism, you keep on fighting. Under FEMA, you have the RBI and the Enforcement Directorate, none of them whom you would like to oppose. So you should bear in mind that you follow the policy in spirit. Once you become an NRI, he can come on a visit to India, but again, the stay is now curtailed to 120 days. That is again a relief only for Indian citizens and persons of Indian origins. Visit is again not defined. Please bear in mind a person who comes to India to settle to India for good. And this has happened in this pandemic for many cases where people NRIs have left their jobs or they do not have their jobs now and have come back to India for good. They will not enjoy that visit relief, a relief of 120 days or 181 days. That relief they will not enjoy because it is not a visit that they have come in. They have come here for settling for good. And therefore, they may not qualify for the benefit of 181-day test or a 120-day test. There is a decision, I have marked it over there. Involuntary stay because of impounding of passport to be excluded for the counting of days. Again, a Delhi High Court decision. So if you are involuntarily staying in India, then you will be excluded. Those number of days will be excluded. But bear in mind, the Delhi High Court decision has said that this cannot be considered as a precedent as it has to be a case-to-case basis. Also, there has been a relief provided for people who are stuck here because of the pandemic. Those from March 22 onwards till the end of the year, those number of days for those who are here because of the lockdown, they will not be considered, those number of days will not be considered during determining their residential status in India. But what about the current year? 1st April onwards, there has been no such relief which has been announced, and therefore we are waiting for that relief. It was announced in the press release by the Income Tax Department that they will announce a relief once the lockdown lifts. However, till date, there has been no such relief. We hope that there's a broader relief and people don't have to go for each case to the Income Tax Department. There are certain other things. Bank accounts can be continued but need to be converted to NRO account, as I already mentioned. All the rest, investment in shares, insurance policies, existing loans, they can all continue, existing loans till their original maturity. But you need to inform your banks, companies and your custodians. Please bear in mind the TDS will henceforth be deducted under 195 as the person has become a non-resident. These are the things which one needs to bear in mind as far as non-residential status is concerned. Can I request the organizers about how much time I have, because I am still on my case study 3.
Sir, we have overrun by 5 minutes, sir, so you can finish it by 2 minutes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now the rest of the case studies are mainly to deal with specific cases which have been detailed in my presentation. So please bear in mind that if you have any issues on that, then you can always call back on me. Because of the paucity of time, I will not be able to go through all of them. NRI's non-repatriable investment, the whole idea and focus of this case study is that there is a huge relief which has been provided under the Schedule 4 of FEMA notification number 20R, now the NDI rules. Now under the NDI rules, where an SPV which is owned and controlled by NRIs can also do as much as what an NRI does. The only recourse to that is that a $1 million scheme which is available only to NRI individuals would not be allowed to the SPV. However, the SPV can itself be exited upon outside India. And there are several investments which can be made under the non-repatriable basis, a very, very open policy. Practically, you can do almost most of the things except for those which I have listed here. Even real estate leasing and retail trading is permitted as far as non-repatriable investment is concerned. The benefits are that there is no lock-in period, which is otherwise there under FDI. There is no filing of any documents. Details are to be given to the bank, and that's it. No valuation norms are there. However, tax valuation norms will have to be kept in mind as far as Section 56 and transfer pricing are concerned, and there is no limit for the portfolio investment. So all these kind of things, how they can transfer, all that has been detailed in my presentation. I'll skip through the slides for the time being. When it comes for NRI's incomes from immobile properties, again, please bear in mind there is one change. While a person who can own number of properties, he can own number of plots of land, whether leasing can be done or not was a question mark. They have now clarified it that the leasing of properties can happen for as many number of properties as you want. It will not be considered as real estate business, which is a prohibited term. As I mentioned to you here, real estate business is one of the prohibited items as far as non-repatriable investment is concerned. Even for NRIs, it should not tantamount that is investment in immovable properties or plots of land. There's frequent trading which leads to a real estate business scenario. If so, then they will face an issue under FEMA. It will be violation of FEMA. That is what I again detailed in this case study. TDS part we all know. Can CA give certificate about NRI's bank accounts? And there are certain reliefs which are there for a person who is returning to India. Those also have been detailed in my last case study. Way forward, there are several relaxations. However, there are not many tax reliefs now. The tightening of residency test will result in upheaval, and therefore one person has to be careful that persons may be enjoying a FEMA non-residential status, but a resident and ordinary resident status under tax. And please bear in mind, NRI status cannot be misused. There is more and more scrutiny of NRIs which is happening. Thank you so much, and sorry for rushing through this. I just wanted to cover the main points because of paucity of time. Please bear with me, and please come back to me. My contact details are there.
Thank you so much, sir.